Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider Series. I am so excited today because we have one of our best business schools in the world, IESE, and Julia and Josemaria are going to share a little bit about corporate venturing, but they're the ones from the teaching side. So I think we're going to learn a lot today. Julia, Josemaria, thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for inviting us.
So let's start maybe Julia first. Tell us why you got interested in corporate venturing.
That's very interesting. Good. I am an engineer by training, and I did my PhD on growth strategies. And I was very interested in understanding how large corporations grow and what can they do in terms of growing. And basically, after some years of doing different strategies and different ways of looking at the companies and how they are growing, I stumbled with this idea of why not growing through working with startups. And that was precisely why we got into this corporate venturing idea. And it was already several years ago.
Very nice. How about you, Josemaria?
So from my side, I'm going to be this year at IESE for 11 years, more or less. And I have been lucky to be working with Julia. And a few years back, I was introducing one of the projects of corporate venturing. And since there, I have been involved somehow on those activities. I see that there is a huge trend on this topic, not only because the number of corporations working with startups has increased dramatically, especially since 2016, not only in corporate venture capital, but other mechanisms, but also there are a lot of synergies where there is a win situation for both corporations and startups.
Very nice. Julia, you talk about working with startups, but most corporations don't really know how to work with startups. How do you approach such a topic, which is not trivial? It sounds easy, but it's
not trivial at all. And in fact, this is why we started studying it, because you can hear many times these sentences where they say we are working with and blah, blah, blah. But the question is how? And many companies really were eager to understand the process, how to do it. And this is precisely, we thought that our research, I like to do field research. What it means is really being in touch with the ones that are doing it and trying to understand how are they doing it, conceptualize what they are doing it, and then making it available for many others that they are probably thinking in starting or doing it. Basically, the idea was precisely that because it's not so easy to understand how, first because the startup market is an unstructured market. Yes. So it's like, how do we approach that when we, in large corporations, we are used to approach things in a very standard manner, and we have databases and the channels that are already there and so on and so forth. So how do you approach an unstructured market? So that's why for the last, not 10, it's a little bit less, but we have been working on that.
Very nice. Josemaria, I'm sure you have something more to add.
So I would say some of the probably misunderstandings that we have identified. One is corporate venturing is not new. Since 1914, there has been cases and research, for instance, General Motors and DuPont, and many more. However, the discussion has been quite focused on corporate venture capital, one of the 11 mechanisms. Something that we describe in one of our first studies is that there are plenty of other mechanisms that are growing at the speed. For instance, the venture client, the case of BMW Garage in Germany, where the corporation is the first client of the startup, or a venture builder. So corporate venture is not only corporate venture capital, but there are plenty of mechanisms where over the second statement, and we have built recently a new project around that jointly with the European Commission, is corporate venturing is not only for large corporations, but also for small and medium enterprises. If we look markets in Latin America, in Asia, where you are right now, in Europe and in many others, for instance, here in Spain, where we are based right now, 99.9% of the market are small and medium enterprises. So the second statement is this is also for small and medium enterprises.
Before you start, read the IESE report. So I like the challenges which may lead to pilots. I think most companies would understand what pilots means, but challenges may not be so obvious. And clearly, Julia, I think you're making a very good point, which is start with the why, start with the strategy. And maybe you have a clear view about what pain points you're trying to solve. Now, how do you go about creating a challenge? And why would startups care about you setting up a challenge?
Very good. So it's a very good point. So let's say that the company has two main needs. The first one is optimization of your processes. Nowadays, many people believe that technology strategy is about digitalization. And of course, that's true. So this is one thing. A very different thing, we are exploring a new area. We are exploring a new market. We are exploring a new way of doing things. And here, to put together the challenge is a little bit more open, right? Because you are exploring. In exploring, maybe you think about, for instance, sustainability. You would like to be more sustainable, but you have no idea which type of materials are out there. You have no idea if there is CO2 capturing companies that are helping you to reduce your CO2. Usually, the challenges that you are facing in some of your regular processes can be solved by someone else outside. And doing a challenge is putting together the problem and showing it to the community of startups so you can find a solution. But there is also another type of challenges that are more exploratory.
I like the way it's framed. You're making clear this is a challenge, but you don't know the solution. In a way, you set up a challenge, hoping to be surprised with solutions you could not think about, which is very different from what companies would do with a request for proposal. You already know what type of solutions you want. You're bringing a challenge with the solutions you don't know how to solve, and you may be surprised by innovative ways to solve it.
Correct. And especially if they are coming from areas where you don't master, right? Because it's not your industry, it's not your business model. This is what I would call incorporating innovation in your company, right?
I actually want to double click on the different industry. And I think the sustainability example is a good one. Everyone is looking at solutions. Sometimes the solution comes from a completely different industry. And the challenge allows you to reach out way more widely than your current network.
Absolutely. And imagine what we see in terms of materials, in terms of energy consumption, depending on your challenge. You may have very different solutions that are precisely coming from very different ways of looking at the problem. And then the company first learns, because you learn where is all this coming from and what are the different solutions. But then you also choose which one fits your strategy better. That's why it's very important to have a good strategy, understanding where are you heading and where do you want to go.
So I want to then take the next step. You do select a great solution that surprises you, that looks promising. It leads to pilot. Any best practices you would recommend in how to set up pilots for success? And success may be that it doesn't work out, but for the right reason. So how do you set up a pilot?
When we were analyzing the venture client, where it's quite common to do proof of concepts, was the 3 buckets and the buffer. The 3 buckets describe some of these challenges. For instance, you can identify a challenge in a business unit and then identify a potential opportunity in the market and then bring that to the business unit. The second one is the buffer. And you can see companies such as Telefonica, Schneider Electric, Alibaba, IBM that are using similar technique with different names, where you have the corporate venturing team, which attracts external opportunities. Then you have the business unit. But what is happening in the middle? For instance, when the corporate venture team is trying to push that innovation into the business unit, sometimes the business units say, I have developed with my R&D team already something similar, or I maybe come back in 3 years. So how it's happening and what we have seen is the buffer. For instance, coming back to the example that we have cited at the beginning, BMW Garage, they have the following challenge and how they manage this buffer. They have 3 profiles. One profile, someone who has been in the company for many years, white hair, knows the executive committee, legal, IT, and know how to get processes approved. Number 2, someone from human resources who understand the culture and how they think on the corporate side, but also the startup side to reduce the friction. And third, someone who in 72 hours can put you in the phone. So that buffer was able to manage this connection between the corporate venture team and the business units. In other companies, they are kind of internal sellers. So for instance, let's say that we have a portfolio of startups that we have invested or that we are currently incubating. They spend a lot of time mapping the internal needs of business units to internally sell the portfolio of solutions to those.
The human component is so important. So I was at the RIE conference in Singapore 2 days ago, and in the panel I was asked, how do you convince internal business group to work with you? And I said, don't try. You will find many teams who want to work with you and you just focus on them first and you build success story. So back to the human component, how do you create these kind of internal promoters, people who are passionate about technology? How do you identify them? Do you find any tips from your research?
The way I look at it is the following. The corporate venturing team has one part, as Josemaria was mentioning, that is an evangelist at the end, is doing something that the company has not done before and is not used to. You need to have a person there that is patient, that is good public relations in the right sense, but just someone that has the patience to explain things and be enthusiastic about the topic. Why? It's because you're asking people to do things differently, and that's always not easy. Having said that, in large corporations, you find so many good people that are not able to develop these characteristics of doing things differently. So as soon as they have the opportunity, they jump on it. This is the one that I need to go, talk, and move, because probably you will find many inside of large corporations that are waiting for those opportunities, not trying to push things that they don't care about it. That's a waste of time, right? So having a good understanding, being able to listen and being empathetic with their own problems, that helps a lot.
I think this is the golden nugget, which is you need this buffer to protect how fragile innovation is. And then you need someone on the inside with empathy, willing to try and who's been maybe waiting for that. And I feel this combination is what will create the opportunity for innovation to flourish.
Based on what you have described, and also Julia, that in another study, something that we found is that the challenges that those companies have in this process is different from those that they are building their corporate venturing teams, scaling, or consolidating. And we did that classification because the challenges that they face are completely different. For instance, what mechanisms I'm going to use? I'm going to convince the executive committee. How much budget and from where is going to come in? The second one is make the business units the winners. For instance, something that we found in 3 energy companies, I think was 4 years ago, is there was a chief innovation officer that what he was doing was to translate the winner to the business unit. So the value proposition that he was offering to the business unit was, if this doesn't succeed, I will cover it. Otherwise, we will share the cost and you will get the visibility. Now, we are talking a lot about startups in general, but what we have not talked is 70%, precisely 69.4% of these collaborations fail, doesn't succeed. Moreover, if we go into the field of deep tech, those startups connected with emerging technologies, the failure rate is even higher. Why? Time horizon is longer, risk is higher, and cost is higher.
First, I like your point about business units being the winner, and corporate venturing is in the service of the corporation. I want to challenge a little thing you said, which is 69% fail. But fail doesn't mean this is a bad outcome. It just means that the explorations end up with a conclusion not to proceed, which may still be the right decision. So can you maybe give a little granularity about how you see the 69% fail as good outcome versus bad outcome?
Experimentation is something that everybody talks about, but nobody understands that for experimenting, you really need to have failures. Otherwise, as you were saying, you are not experimenting. You are just doing what you know how to do. But something that is so obvious for people that are immersed in that ecosystem is not obvious at all for a company that has been successful, thank you to the optimization processes and the standardization and so on and so forth. It's going against the culture of a company that is used to do things always right from the first moment. And this is not experimenting. That doesn't mean that is a failure, right?
Exactly. That's why, because it doesn't mean failing. So experimentation is not deterministic. Now, Josemaria, you talked a lot, multiple times about budget. And budget implies ROI. And this is where it's actually challenging. And in a way, I like that you said the easiest step for doing corporate venturing is a challenge, because you start from a pain point, which means it's easier to explain the ROI. But how do you think about ROI when you engage with startups in the exploration aspect?
Let's start with some disclaimers. One is on the startup side, 7 out of 8 startups disappear after the first 5 years. Number 2, in terms of funding raise, according to another study, 1 out of 4,000 companies raise venture capital. This is coming data from the US in both cases. And the third one is that around 70% is the average of the mechanisms. However, I would say in the third study that we published, we segmented the success rate or failure rate by mechanism. And you can see how it differs by mechanism. Now, with that in mind, let's go to the second block that you raised on the ROI, some things that are focusing their investment thesis or their collaboration thesis in that direction, others in strategic results, and others that are hybrids. And let's provide an example. For instance, there is a business case that was published maybe 15 years back. It's the case of Intel. What they did was, we are going to invest in companies and startups that they are using our technology. So on the one side are going to be good startups that they are going to provide I would say a return on investment on the purely investment because they are good startups, but also they are going to provide us strategic results because since they are going to use our technology, our revenue side is going to grow. So they are combining both.
Very nice. And before Josemaria, you go into the detail, I have a question, which is probably a fun question. In your report for the squad, you use skydivers as a picture, which is very technical, very hard to do. You could die. So why did you choose that photo?
I think it was 5 years ago, I decided to do that. And my legs were trembling and I was very scared. But when you go out of the airplane, the first 10 times, you usually go with others. Mm-hmm. You are connected and then you throw yourself. And I highly recommend it.
Nice. I definitively want people to read the report. We are not going to cover everything you said in the report, but I just want to do a double click on one type. And I think the one that I find interesting is a scouting platform. So maybe you could explain the scouting platform and what's the value and when to decide for it and when not to decide for it.
If you are going to work with someone that you have worked before, another pattern that we found is that maybe it was around 60% of the corporate venture squads, they were working with partners, with members that you were working before.
Already trusting and already engaged.
Correct. And remember that what we are doing in that precise mechanism at the end is, again, going back to the first idea, structuring a market that is unstructured. So many times when you have something unstructured, you don't know how to look at it. You know how to analyze it. So one step is, let's try to understand what's in the market, what's there, how it looks like. And then, because many times you would not even think about what is out there. So having that structure in a way through a scouting mission, a challenge, or whatever is the mechanism at the end, helps you to get a broader view, real solutions, not the ones that we find in LinkedIn or that some people tell us that is already there, right? Real solutions that are already in the market. So I think that's very important.
I think that's also where the analogy to the skydivers is really fitting. It's very hard at the beginning. You need to structure yourself, but you're already trusting each other. You're not going to skydive with people you don't trust.
Right.
But over time, as you practice with the same, you're going to have second nature type of trust, the next level of trust and working together. And I wonder if it's not actually the ultimate value of the squad, which is you're starting to build partnership to the next level on top of doing the corporate venturing.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that having the right strategy is important. So there are many different ways of doing it, but I would say that this is one that we found that is interesting for companies. And in fact, this is happening, right? And not all the people in the squad are going to have the same feeling or interest. Maybe after 2 or 3 years of working together, you find squads that maybe is like just 2 or 3 instead of the 5 that were at the beginning. And with these 3, you do the next step. So I think that at the end of the day, collaboration is what is needed when technology is going so fast. I would say that I would like to see the squad like when we think about the venture fund, right? A fund has a beginning and an end, and it has objectives that you need to reach. So squads are not there for being forever. I think that they also, if you have to think about strategically what was the purpose of pulling it together, you may think that in 3-4 years it has accomplished what you were looking for, and it's fine. It's not a failure. It's just the other way around. That's the right time for now closing up and going to the next thing. So I would say it's an ephemeral organization. It's not something that should last necessarily. In fact, it would be weird because probably the company is now in the next thing and needs something else, maybe a squad with different companies. So I would say that probably is an ephemeral organization. It's not something that should be there lasting forever.
Nice. You just mentioned funds, and I realized we spent the first 15 minutes, we're not even talking about corporate VC. I'm
Right.
sure the audience is wondering, what do you think about corporate VC?
I would say it's the traditional way of doing it. It's a very expensive mechanism. But I have seen, and this is interesting, I have seen companies that have built their own ecosystem, their own corporate venturing ecosystem, starting with a corporate venture capital. But for many companies, that's not reachable. So for the company that can afford it, I think it's a very good way. Now, for middle-sized and small companies, that is not feasible many times.
Yeah.
Maximum, they can get together with another to put a fund and so on, but usually it's not feasible for them to start one. I would say then don't try, right? Go for something that you can get the results without that huge expensive cost that a corporate venture capital is.
I like the way you frame it, because for small to medium company, they can't afford it. And sometimes for a very large company, the financial return on the fund will not move the needle. And so maybe I should ask the questions, to which size do you think it starts to make sense for a corporation to think about a corporate VC?
One is the why. First of all, so rather than the size is, why are we creating a CVC? And to have extreme clarity. It's not because my competitor is doing it, it's because I have listened it in one conference, or because everyone is using it, but the why. Then you have, for instance, small and medium enterprises. They are not able to have a minimum size, to have a budget to attract the startups, and they partner with other SMEs to have a minimum fund. Then you have large corporations that they have from different sources, either from balance sheet or other sources to get the funding. So it really depends. I don't have a one rule for everyone or for everything.
And you're right with this last thing, that many times if they are doing it from the balance sheet, or if it's a fund, a standalone fund, many times companies don't have a standalone fund, but they have an investment strategy that is not so aggressive, because you don't need an ROI on that money. It's a money that keeps flowing into opportunities that you see. At the end, the activity is the same of a fund, but it doesn't have the structure and the need for returns in terms of a portfolio. So nowadays, companies that are investing in startups, you find many, not necessarily out of a fund, but out of their own balance sheet.
And this is why this podcast is called Corporate Venturing Insider and not Corporate Venturing Capital Insider. There's so many things you can do in terms of corporate venturing. And what you say about strategy, start with strategy, is so important, because there are so many choices you can make. Some make sense, some will not. Now, if we think about the entrepreneurs, this is very challenging for them to understand how to engage with a corporation when there are so many ways corporate venturing can be done. What would be your advice to entrepreneurs?
Let's say, when you think about entrepreneurs, you may be thinking about someone that is already scale up, meaning someone that maybe is in their 10th year, already several millions of revenues, but they want to jump to 100 million, right? So someone that is looking for that. That's a very different situation of someone that has just put one product in the market successfully, starting to sell with a good business model. In the young one, pairing with a corporation could be really good for you in terms of developing a portfolio of other products that you may not be able to do by your own. You have been successful in developing one, hitting it, being very good at it, but you cannot live out of that product if you want to grow. Now, pairing with a large corporation puts a lot of assets close to you that you may be using precisely for, first of all, growing fast on your main product, and then developing the portfolio of other products that would put you in that situation where you will be not a scale-up, but already a grown-up company, going IPO and many things. Now, here it's going to depend on what are you looking for. Are you looking for a distribution market? Are you looking for entering international markets? So it depends on what you are looking for.
Josemaria, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs?
To reflect on the following 5 questions. Number 1, are your KPIs aligned with the ones of the corporate venturing team or the corporation? Number 2, are the time horizons similar? Number 3, is the corporation has, and also yourself, the required budget and resources for that proof of concept or pilot? Number 4, what are the risks associated? And 5, who is your internal sponsor, and is enough senior and knows how to move within the company for that proof of concept? Those 5 questions.
I think we are ending with a beautiful golden nugget. Thank you so much for your time today. I think the audience got so much to think about, and I recommend them to read the report.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having us, Nicolas, and looking forward to meet you again someplace in the world.